Hi, my name is Anant Deshpande. I am the Regional Vice President for DigiCert, managing the India and ASEAN business. Yeah, look, it's an interesting question. It's it's a difficult question, honestly speaking, because the threat landscape is so widespread and it's not easy to deal with so many threats. Right? There are threats everywhere. Attack surface is expanding. So honestly speaking, life of a CISO is not easy. Okay, but you asked me about what are the top three threats that I'm seeing. Well, the first one would essentially be some of the changes that are coming, especially as it relates to PKI and cryptography. Okay, it may not be so much of a threat, but it is definitely a risk because the CA browser forum, which essentially is the Chromes, the Mozillas, the Firefoxes, the Safaris of the world, they have mandated that certificate life cycles are going to shrink to 47 days in some time from now, which means that what you did typically once a year needs to be done 8 times a year. And its colonial cousin is actually domain validation, which you do typically once a year today. That has to be done every 10 days, which is about 36 times every year. So if you're a CISO, you got to think about the kind of operational overhead that is going to hit you in the next 2 to 3 years, right? And multiply that magnitudes of 8 and 36. And that's not easy because that potentially could disrupt your IT infrastructure, business critical applications, and especially in the context of resilience as well as agility, because one single expired certificate out of all of those certificates could actually bring your entire business down. The second threat is around, as we know it, generative AI, interactive AI, all of those things, because attacks are going to be delivered. In fact, they are being delivered at scale today using artificial intelligence. It is everywhere, by the way. If you take software, for example, AI is writing into CI/CD pipelines. It is writing into GitHub repositories. It is writing into open source. Malware attacks are getting crafted using AI. And finally, I think one of the big threats we all need to be prepared for is quantum computing. When quantum computing does become available, which it will in the next few years, it is going to be real. It is going to be able to break the very fabric of digital trust on which we rely on today. Right? So I think these are the three big trends or threats or challenges which we all collectively need to be prepared for. There's a lot of things to do, but I think one of the things that the community can do really well is focus on the basics. The first of those is to fix all the blind spots in your organization. And I'll talk about it from a certificate and a PKI perspective. See, there is such a big estate of certificates that is there in every organization. And most of this is actually invisible. If you look at an average enterprise today, they have anywhere between 20 and 50,000 certificates. Right? And it's very difficult to keep track of all of those. Because if you don't have visibility, how do you secure it? How do you manage it? So it all starts with visibility. So getting visibility, discovering the entire crypto estate in your entire organization is really, really critical. Once you've done that, you start building consistency around it. Right? For example, if you talk about a multi-cloud environment, all the hyperscalers manage PKI in a very, very different way. Right? There's no one single consistent way in which they do it. So you have to have the ability to sort of manage the entire cloud, non-cloud, private, public, all of that estate from one single pane of glass. So that is important. And the third is automation. Automation is not an option. Anything that can be automated has to be automated. So I think these are the three priorities that CISO should really focus on. And then in the next, you said what around the next, say, 8 to 12 months, start focusing on metrics which they can start measuring. For example, between mean time to repair and detect. Of course, they do it today, but how do you do it from a crypto perspective, right? How do you look at what percentage of your PKI or your digital trust estate is actually compliant to your hygiene standards, right? And then what percentage of your entire application stack is compliant really to your business metrics. So I think these are some of the things that we should start doing today, as well as looking at about 12 months down the future. Yeah, again, a very good question, very relevant question, not easy. Okay, but if I were to sort of provide a perspective on this, I would start at what we call the digital trust layer, which is the foundational layer for everything that is connected, including applications, servers, machines, devices, human beings, all of that stuff. Okay, see, because if you were to talk about deploying IT or IT security or looking at risk, okay, I think a good place to start would be actually at the digital trust, the foundational layer, which is the glue that sort of binds everything together. Okay. So, and once you've done that, then you start talking about how do you start identifying the gaps within this infrastructure? How do you start looking at the open attack surface that is there, which is exposed, right? How do you look at all of the crypto assets which are there within the organization? How do you look at providing the right kind of identity? And by the way, identity is really, really important from PKI standpoint. Okay, it all starts with there. How do you define the identity? And identity can mean different things for devices. It could mean different for machines. It could mean different for software. It could mean different for containers. So how do you provide the optimized identity and then start managing that all at scale across its entire life cycle? So I think if you start there, that's really a good place to start thinking about how do you secure end to end. Okay, I think you asked me quite a few questions within that one question. Yeah. So I think the first is in terms of technologies. Let's talk about AI. Let's talk about quantum as an example. These are technologies that we know are here already. They are going to evolve, or they are going to come at us in the not too distant future. So we have to start preparing for those technologies. From an investment standpoint, that's a good place to really start looking at. The other thing from a CISO perspective, and I get asked this question pretty often, that what is the changing role of the CISO, right? Of course, they have to be business enablers. There's no doubt about it. But at the same time, the part to that is really through technology evangelization, right? It's not only about management of risk or putting in security solutions. It's how the CISO really defines and evangelizes what is going to be the next, what is going to be the next security infrastructure and how their organization is going to look in the next couple of years, right? So I think it is progressing from just being a chief information security officer or a CISO to really a chief digital trust officer or a CDTO. I think that's really where we're going from, roles, responsibilities, and that